The internet is full of options, hacks, and how-tos all promising to teach us everything we must know. I'm not sure I trust all of those promises, but it raises an important question. What are the essential skills students need to succeed in today's world? And just as importantly, how do we know our educational system gives students opportunities to learn those skills? On this episode of Homeroom Huddle, we're discussing the portrait of a graduate, even though when the show was recorded, we were still calling it Profile of a Graduate. Just how many times did we mix that up? Well, if you figure it out, a gold star might be in your future. Stick around until the end for details on how to win. Whether you're in the classroom, around the kitchen table, or on the move, Homeroom Huddle is your invitation to stay connected to what matters most to the Issaquah School District. So welcome, everybody. In today's huddle, we have Marnie Moraldo, School Board Director for District 2 and our current School Board President.
Hello.
Sydney Mullings, School Board Director for District 4.
Hi, everyone.
Heather Tao-Yik, Superintendent of the Issaquah School District.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Julia Bamba, our Principal on Special Assignment, Accelerating Secondary Innovation.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
And Krish Parashar, last but not least, one of our current school representatives to the school board.
Hi, glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have this conversation today, but before we delve into the profile of a graduate and what exactly it is, I think we need to have a little history lesson. So, Marnie, I'm wondering if you can talk us through House Bill 1599 and talk about how that affected high school graduation requirements.
Sure. A little bit about House Bill 1599. It did change so that high-stakes testing was not required as a graduation requirement. And the State Board of Education did a lot of work in this area as to what do students really need to know to graduate. So there was a growing dissatisfaction with standardized testing. Are they really measuring everything that we need to know for a student to graduate? And the federal government had actually already loosened some of the rules. There was a bill called No Child Left Behind that was very strict on testing, and there were mandates if you weren't getting growth in measurements. And as those trickled away, as that was reauthorized into what's now our Elementary and Secondary Education Act, so now that we're at that point with the federal legislation, it gave us more freedom in the state of Washington to really look at what are the critical needs of a graduate. And high-stake testing was not really the best way to measure is a student ready to graduate. So it removed that high-stake testing requirement, and it gave a lot more freedom to be able to look at what do we really need in a graduate. So it created graduation pathways. Not every student is along the same path, so they don't necessarily need to be taking the same classes. And so what are the opportunities that students have to get the knowledge that they need to pursue their careers in the future? Some students need to take some classes and some students don't. So what are the classes that they want to take in order to reach their goal after graduation? And so this provides that, and it really started a path towards mastery-based learning.
Okay, so instead of trying to create graduates that generally have the same skills regardless of where they hope to go in the world, students can now choose a path that works best for them. I want to explore that, but first, Marnie mentioned that each of these learning paths are based on the concept of mastery-based learning. Heather, can you give us a quick overview of what exactly that is and what that shift represents in the way that students and teachers approach learning?
Great question, and great job, Maria, for the history lesson. It's always helpful to ground ourselves in what's been happening before to get to know where we are here now and where we're going in the future. For us, mastery is really about helping our young people find the opportunities where they can apply their learning, apply their knowledge acquisition, so that they can show their skills and the competencies that are required for them to be successful in life. We want them to be able to thrive after they leave our school district in whatever passion they so choose, and we have a responsibility to equip them with the various skills and competencies to help them get there. That means potentially allowing them to pursue different passion areas. It allows them to also think about where they are in terms of pacing, and we support them wherever they are in their pacing. And for us, it gives them opportunities, our students, opportunities to be able to show what they're learning and how to apply that learning in many different ways. So there's not just one way to show what you've learned and how to apply it. There are many ways. And for us, showing that level of mastery and progression towards that is a really important value.
And I think that's really cool that we now have a system that's being suggested where we're focusing less on the test and more on making sure that students are learning what they need to know to be effective. We have this pendulum effect that goes back and forth between testing and a more flexible approach to teaching. So I have to ask, if we're shifting away from the testing, how are we actually measuring this to make sure it's working effectively? So if every student, for example, is on a different path towards graduation, how do we know that each of them has learned enough to graduate? Did the Washington State Legislature have an answer to that at all? Sydney, do you have any insight for us?
Yeah, I think it's an important question because if we're going to do this big shift, then how does it work and do we know if it's functional? So I think if we go back to some of the information that Marnie shared about House Bill 1599, the legislature realized that there needed to be a framework within the system to make sure that we could implement mastery-based learning. And so they created a working group for mastery-based learning. In that group, they could then work on what would be the approach, what would be available to students, and make sure that each student gets prepared for their future. They designed a set of criteria, but more importantly, they looked at something called the High School and Beyond Plan to actually help give a structure and a structured path or map for students beyond their high schooling. During this time, the group explored if there would be barriers, making sure that we understood if there would need to be other provisions made, and actually suggested additional legislation to make recommendations. And so it's out of that work that we have the profile of the graduate that defines skills, knowledge, attributes, and competencies that every graduate should have.
Talking about laws and regulations isn't always the most exciting thing, but I think it's essential for understanding where this concept came from. And just to confirm, I do think it's helpful to know that there is some kind of framework and regulation in place, so it's not just an immeasurable thing where teachers are teaching, but we can't tell if they're being successful or not. I just want to confirm this one point, and Julia, I'm directing this one at you as someone who has been a principal and worked in the schools. The profile of a graduate, is this just another name for some kind of standardized test in disguise, or is this really something different in practice?
Okay, thanks for asking. I think it's important for us to clarify that the profile of a graduate isn't just another benchmark tool, it's not another assessment tool, but instead we can see this as a framework for helping us to guide skills and mindsets that we want every student to develop while they're in school with us and by the time they graduate. So these are things that we've mentioned like agency, collaboration, critical thinking, ability to communicate effectively. And the profile of a graduate can really give us common language to be able to describe these skills that are often agreed upon, but we don't always have the common language to be able to talk about these, to be thoughtful in how we implement these. So as a district, we can develop a profile of a graduate to provide that common language and help us to really think about how we embed these in the classroom. We're also building our profile of a graduate on our Washington State profile. And this can allow us to create our own version of the values and the priorities within our community that we think are important for our students. So this should actually expand beyond just a poster on the wall, and it can really start to be a way for us to develop and guide our learning. It can help shape student experiences across all grades and all content areas. And we have seen a lot of examples across the country where a profile can help to engage students in learning that is relevant, that allows them to take their learning and expand it beyond the classroom and to become more community-connected learning. So I'm excited for us to see where this profile can take us and engage students in their learning across all of our grades and all of our content areas.
Okay. Heather, you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Julia, for sharing that vision for where we could go. I think sometimes we could also consider the profile as a portrait or a promise to our community about what our students will be able to do after they leave our system, and that is a progression across early learning all the way through grade 12 and beyond. How it is different, though, from what a high school exam might be or standardized testing is that when we have a test, it kind of just captures one moment in time for what a student might have learned content-wise. And that's not the full story of a student's learning journey in our school district and in school in general. Our students are constantly learning other skills that go with learning content, like learning to learn, or as Julia said, agency. And so that's a really important skill that's not measured in a singular test. There are other aspects of our students persevering through learning content, how they learn from maybe a mistake or maybe not acquiring content early on in a class or a progression, or they are able to accelerate more quickly through content. So there are all these different ways our kids are learning, and being able to reflect on that process is also not captured in a standardized test or a test score. For us, we want to make sure that our students are able to persevere through challenges, to also know where they want to be challenged, and to be able to explain, hey, I'm ready for something more, and to articulate and know themselves and their learning journey, as well as to be able to work as a team to problem solve and have opportunities for leadership development. Again, a single test is a number sometimes about where a student is in that moment in time, and we know that they are so much more, and we don't want our students to feel like they are just one particular score on a particular test. And so there's many more ways that we can look at our students holistically, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I love that idea that this is a promise, that it gives our community some idea of what exactly students are learning and taking away, so they have some kind of way of looking at education and seeing how the pieces fit together. I actually wanted to know what our staff and community thought about this idea, so I attended a recent staff meeting, as well as one of our school board's town hall meetings introducing the profile of a graduate. Here's what they had to say.
Yeah, I'd say this excites me because there seems to be a rhetoric that I've heard about the school system in general and in the U.S. nationwide about just how schools and public schools don't adapt. Like it's been stagnant since the 1800s, and there hasn't been much change or thought to it. So it's exciting that you see and hear that there actually is a lot of thought. And okay, how do we want students to come out of our system, and how do we want them to thrive after they leave? And I guess my curiosity is, how do we send that message to our constituents and to the students and to the nation on, like, we're actually putting thought into this, and we're not just doing the same thing we've always done. We're really evaluating what students need and how they can succeed.
I am really excited about this. As somebody who works in career and technical education, we're always hearing from students. They want to know, what skills do we need to have to thrive in the workplace? If you Google or, you go on the internet and you search for what skills, what soft skills or what durable skills do I need to thrive in adult life, you're going to see so many articles. There's so many things to have to sift through, and it's nice that our district can provide it all in one place, in one list. And then something I'm curious about is, how will this be used within our classrooms, within our clubs, and in other places? How are we making sure that the language is accessible, and how are we making sure it lives in a place where everybody can see it and everybody knows how to use this information successfully?
I am wondering about the interpreting data skill, and the reason is because I feel like the purpose of this skill is to be able to take in information from primary sources, from the internet, from AI, from whatever it is, and analyze whether the data is accurate or not, like whether it contains misinformation, disinformation, and kind of be able to act on that. And I am not sure that interpreting data is the right way to wrap that up into a nice summary.
I think I would love to see more of an emphasis on personality building and character building instead of just building people academically, because education isn't just for the book smarts, it's for the everything smarts. It's for preparing what comes after high school. A lot of what I see is we prepare students really well for how to go do AP Calculus, how to learn AP Physics, AP Bio, how to be really good technical career people. It's often left out, like just how to be a person, how to not just be an employee, a robotic cog in the workforce. It's really giving them real world skills, which I think some of those that I would like to see are self-discipline, self-advocacy, competency, data analysis, and especially critical thinking and problem solving. All right, thank you.
Okay, only 4 comments, but a lot to take in there. Any reactions to that? Things that you heard that you want to comment on? Marnie?
I think for me, two different people mentioned the word thrive. And in fact, that's in the vision that the board came up with. We want our students to thrive. It's not just getting them through and graduating, but what can you do with what you've learned? And beyond just being a cog in the wheel, I think somebody mentioned, but to thrive, to have a life that is going to create value for you, for your family, for your community. I think that's really important.
Other reactions?
You know, I love hearing these comments and getting a sense of the expectations that different individuals have. And there's so much that comes into play when you look at a school system, and it really is beyond what is the specific academic outcome and result. It's about who are our students becoming. And this really is an opportunity for us to make sure we check in with that and have a pulse of where our students are hoping to go, where our families are hoping to go, where our community needs them to be. And so I think it's what I hear in those comments are the additional expectations.
One thing that I heard and I want to ask about is some of the terminology that is used in the profile of a graduate, some of the labels for some of the skills that we're trying to develop. One person commented on interpreting data and wondering whether that was the right label. Is the profile of a graduate done, or are we still revising this thing? Sydney?
So is the profile of the graduate done? No, I don't think it is done. I think it's for sure right now in the Issaquah School District a draft conversation. It's one that we're taking out to town halls, as you heard in that piece, some of that feedback. And I don't know personally if it's ever done. I think the point of it is, how do we rally our community far and wide? How do we leverage the research we have that's been provided by the state working groups, by wonderful academics, and say, how do we put in context of where we are today, which will be different to where we are in the next 20 years? So is it done yet? No. It will get to a good point of publishability. And then in the future, we'll figure out how to keep it refreshed and keep growing. But I think that's the excitement of the time we have now, is how do we pull people together around this topic and hear their voices, hear what concerns it may raise, and keep shaping what this profile can be.
I love the idea that this is a living document too, so it can be changed over time to adjust to the needs. So perfect. Thank you for that clarification. Now, Krish, you've been very quiet over there, listening to all this conversation. As a resident student, and of course that means you're responding for all students, right? You work with students in your school as a rep to the school board. I'd love to know what your take is on this profile of a graduate. Do you think it's a useful tool? And maybe, have you heard anything from other students at all about it?
From a student perspective, I think it's very helpful. It's like a North Star. It tells me where exactly I'm going to be when I graduate and what skills I'll have. It also better lets me align my opportunities and things I'm doing right now to achieve those goals. Going back to what someone said during public comment, they mentioned how school systems have been stagnant. And one thing that students like about this specifically is the adaptability of it. A major portion of the profile graduates actually revolves around interpreting data, and more specifically using the word AI, which I believe shows exactly what is needed in the ever-changing world. Alongside this, adding things like critical thinking, and someone talked about misinformation and disinformation, being able to identify that, overall makes me excited. The thing that makes me excited the most, and for students, is that it's in one place. It's accessible to everyone, and that's something that was brought up in public comment as well. I overall think, coming from a student perspective, that it's helpful, and it helps students see the future and what they're working towards.
Perfect. And I know that when I was in school, and this might be true still today, that you'd go through and you'd get good grades, or you'd try your best to do that. And then when you were done with high school, there was this fear, well, I got all these good grades, but I don't know if they're actually going to help me. Are they really going to apply to life? So I think having this profile of a graduate sounds like it's going to do a better job of helping students connect what they're doing, what classes they're taking, to the kinds of skills they're trying to develop that are actually going to be effective and useful in the workforce. Is that a fair statement? What do you think?
I can jump in here. So since I started as superintendent in the district, I've heard constantly from members of our community, but also our students and our community partners, and families that there's a desire to have a greater connection between what we do in school from early learning all the way through graduation that connects our young people to the world beyond. And we do have, as was earlier mentioned, the High School and Beyond plan and lots of courses that help students explore their passion in a specific career or technical education course. But we do have lots of things that already exist. And so how do we build upon that? We have clubs and activities. We have DECA. There are lots of ways that our students are developing these skills, but we're not talking about it cohesively. And as Chris just said, in a neat and tidy way, that is helpful to make that connection. And it allows us to reflect on, are there areas that we could actually do that more? And what might we think about as new ways to further connect what we're doing in education to what happens after kids graduate?
So, since the profile of a graduate was developed at the state level, our district has taken this concept and framework and made some revisions. Why? Why not just use the state's model as is? Sydney?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think Julia hit on it earlier when she said, largely what's included people agree with. When you go through what's in the profile of the graduate and the state version, I know when I went through it, I felt like, yes, those are the things we want to talk about. I think what we're doing is really putting that work into context and saying, in the context of the Issaquah School District, in the context of our community, what is it that will make it real? What are the strengths we already have? As Heather mentioned, we have our clubs, we have our strong academics, we have lots of great going on for us. So what we want to do is figure out where are we already accomplishing many of these things, but how do we then make it available to all students? And how do we grow and shape what we're doing? So what I love about what we're really doing is the context. And that's what I think we're hearing at our town hall meetings. I also have heard of a term called the IKEA effect. And so part of the IKEA effect is people are more bought into what they build. And so by co-building along with our community, by co-building along with our students, then we know when we get to the end, we're working on something that we're all really invested in. And that's what I think is really important.
So instead of just taking the state's model as is, we really wanted to make it more relatable for people. That's what I heard in there. And also we're trying to make sure that we're tailoring it to whatever Issaquah School District needs most. So it isn't just applicable to state level people, it's custom fit for our students.
Exactly.
You mentioned the town halls. I really appreciated being able to go there and hearing some of those comments from attendees. Not very many of them were willing to talk on a microphone for some reason, but I want to take some of those comments and just winnow them down to one general question, which is, how does this vision actually change what's happening in the classroom? Julia, can you give us an example of what that might look like if a teacher were to take the profile of a graduate and use it to modify their approach to a lesson or something they're doing in their classroom?
So if you were to walk into any of our classrooms at any grade level across the district, then you would likely see this durable skills from the profile of a graduate showing up in our teaching and learning every day. But as we begin to design lessons to really feature the skills within our profile of a graduate, as teachers, we're going to start thinking more thoughtfully and intentionally about how we do this. So if I have a project for a student that may be something they do individually, I may turn that project into a collaborative project. So if students are having to collect data on the weather and look at the weather patterns every morning, rather than have them do that individually, I have them start to work collaboratively. And then I help to support students to develop agency by finding out what is really interesting to them. What are they curious about? What would they like to learn more about? And that's a great example of how we might take a project and then feature a lot of the profile of a graduate skills. So when we move to the high school level, this is where we can really help students begin to develop and apply their learning in a real world setting. We already have many classes that do this, where they take what happens in the classroom and apply it in the real world. For example, we have a class at the high school that built a bookshelf and they donated it to the elementary school. We have another class that built a miniature golf course for a preschool in the community. We often see these types of examples in our career and technical education courses. But if we can really help to create opportunities for students across multiple courses to take what they learn in the classroom and apply that in the real world, then that's where students start to develop agency. We can see their passion for learning come through. We see students working together, collaborating, they're thinking critically, creatively, And the more that we can provide this connection between what happens in the classroom or in the school building to our community, then the more students will see how learning is relevant and how it can help them in the future.
And it sounds like that's closing a gap that I remember from going through school, which is there's a difference between what you learn in school and what actually works in the real world. So now we're actually letting students experience the real world and apply their learning while they're still in the K through 12 experience. So they can actually come out more well-rounded, more prepared for what the world has to offer and what challenges they're going to face.
Exactly.
Okay. Marnie, you look like you're trying to get my attention.
Well, I was thinking along those lines of those students that are in a class going, why do I need to learn this?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all experienced that, especially in math, right? So trying to teach a geometry student that, when you're learning how to structure a proof for geometry, you're actually learning how to structure your ideas. If you're structuring an argument, if you want to be influential, how do I structure things so that it flows from one thing to another? So being able to make those connections across just content areas, I think is really, really important.
And it brings to mind the idea of compartmentalized thinking, that sometimes you feel like, well, I only took these classes. Those are my skills. I don't have skills outside of that. And this allows students to make deeper connections where they realize, well, I can actually apply some of those skills to some of these new challenges I didn't anticipate. Okay, now moving beyond the classroom, how does this profile of a graduate influence big district decisions like our curriculum development, our strategic plan, or even budgets? Heather, as our superintendent, I'm sure this is top of mind for you. What's your take on it?
Yes, I think there's a lot of interesting ways we could consider how we might improve our work, but also just lift up the great work that currently exists in our system. I do want to remind us that academic and foundations are super important still. We would want to make sure that we are shifting in those early years, right in the middle of elementary school, from learning to read to reading to learn, because reading to learn will set our young people up for success in anything that they might choose to pursue in the future. And they need the foundational numeracy skills to be able to understand and interpret, as we talked earlier, about data using numbers. So we would not be taking a big shift away from our focus on academics and foundations, and that's actually a board goal that they have for the district. But what we can say is that with the profile of a graduate being developed and articulated and a good enough version that gets published, we would be able to make different choices and think about how that intersects with our strategic planning process. And because we're in a world of quick adaptation, our strategic plan will last for about 3 years. That's how much our last strategic plan lasted. And so we will continue to refresh our strategic plan on that cycle so that we can take really strong care and attention as we look at what's happening in the world and be able to have those kinds of shifts focused and highlighted in our strategic planning process. And from there flows resource allocation decisions, time, resources, budget, and that's what we would do on an annual basis once we know more. But the strategic plan refresh opportunity is coming up this spring, and we expect to use what has come out of the conversations and a good enough published version of a profile of graduate to be able to inform that work.
And it sounds like it does a really good job of helping people understand what we're already doing as a district.
That's right.
This profile of a graduate actually gives students more leeway to make class choices and decisions in their schooling process where they can still focus on those critical skills that are really going to help them in life and not feel like they have to take an AP or an IB class in order to succeed after high school. Krish, I'm curious, as one of today's students, what do you think about the ideas of like resilience and collaboration and other durable skills and how those might be beneficial to make sure they're not lost in the mix of academics?
That's a great question. I think resilience and collaboration go hand in hand with success and learning and test taking. I think in the long term, the more successful student isn't always the one who gets the highest grade always. It's the one who learned how to work with others throughout the process, who are building the skills outlined in the profile of the graduate. I think the resilience piece fits in by understanding failure, and more importantly than understanding failure is learning how to get back up on your feet and continue running even when you do fail. Collaboration is a big thing as well, and I would argue that it's just as important with test taking and academic skills. It's becoming increasingly obvious that being able to work with others effectively is a vital skill to have, not only in the classroom today, but in the world beyond. Going back to the durable skills piece, the durable skills are the skills that you will apply the most, so you might as well start building those up early. One thing I like about durable skills is that they aren't optional. It isn't an either or with resilience and collaboration versus academics and test taking. Rather, they go together hand in hand. And that's what I love about the profile of the graduate and the direction our district's heading in, making sure students are both successful, not only academically, but in the world beyond as well.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in with a comment on that question?
Krish articulated exactly what I was thinking. I was imagining like a profile of a graduate is enhancing the traditional academic learning opportunities, that idea of collaboration to help not only your own, growth, but you're helping others and you're helping your peers and you're seeing beyond what your own goal is, but the goal of everyone. And so it gives opportunities within our classrooms, which might have more of an academic focus or AP focus, is what is that collaboration? What does that building community look like? And how do you help everyone grow to be better, to then contribute in a larger scale, while also learning and developing your own individual strengths along the way?
Yeah, thank you.
I would add that there's been a sort of a divide between how we talk about academic learning and social and emotional learning. And I think our durable skills actually blend the two to show how interconnected they are. So resiliency, self-awareness, managing oneself, and sort of interpersonal skills all kind of is so important to being able to apply your knowledge when you get to the workforce. And so if we can lift up those skills now in tandem with our academics, we can show that that's a valuable skill set, just as important as what your grade might be or how you do on a test.
Thank you for that clarification. Marnie?
To build on that point, one thing I've really been concerned about is our current state of focus on academics, this points-based drive of perfection.
Yeah.
And our students won't be perfect. And so when I look at the list of what those durable skills are, there's no points associated with them. And there's no need to be absolutely perfect.
Thank you both for those comments. Now, a big concern of any new initiative is that it's going to become some dusty poster on the wall somewhere. So how do we make sure that the profile of a graduate becomes a core part of our culture and doesn't just become one of those things we did once upon a time? Marnie, what's a school board's role in that?
I think for us, the role is really in our governance model, and the strategic plan will be related to that. But I think for the most part, how do we codify that in some manner? And that's, I think we'll do that through the strategic plan. But it's really starting to get a little bit more around, okay, we've defined this item, but how do we measure it? I think that will be some of the work that the board and the administration will have to do together. And then the board, as we do with all of our operational expectations and the stated results that we want for the district, we look at those every single year. So I think keeping that monitoring up, and it might require us to do discussions with postgrad. So it's how do you find a way of measuring? And I think that's going to be really complex.
Yeah, thank you. Sydney, do you have any thoughts about measuring or about how we make sure this thing stays relevant?
I think it's a very important question to ask is how does it stay relevant? And I think that's part of why designing together is so important. I think if we were to just say there's some book on a shelf that we're going to adopt, that, time would go by and we would forget the name of the book, we'd forget what shelf it was on. But instead, what we're doing is opening up an ongoing conversation. We're including all of the relevant people in it, students primarily, but also our staff, our administration, our parents, our community. And I think what's really important is, and this is what the strategic plan will help us do, is how does the district make some of this real? How do the choices that students have in front of them become real as soon as possible? How can we look at maybe previous results from post-graduation surveys of our students where they tell us, hey, we wish we had learned, we wished we had known. Hopefully we can start to see some of that change and shift. But I think what'll be most important is that this becomes real and that it becomes co-developed and that we start to see some successes in the very next batch of students we have.
Thank you. And I'm curious, what might a parent notice if the profile of a graduate goes into effect?
I think first and foremost for me that our parents and families and caregivers know that we have this hope, right, for our young people in our system at all levels in our system to be able to have evidence in their day-to-day school life of effective communication opportunities, of ability to look at data and interpret that, to have good opportunities to team and collaborate with others. So if I were thinking about an elementary school, I'd be looking at, do my kids work with other kids to do a project? Do they sit together at times in a group so they can and help each other. And what are the ways that they're looking at different science-based lessons to start to develop inquiry? How are they using creativity in music or across other lessons and opportunities? So that's what I'd be looking for, is making that connection. I think for us, it's helping to make that more clear, but also for families to have the level of understanding of those skills so they can ask about it, but also look for it in their child's experience.
Krish?
I think one big thing coming from a student perspective is the emphasis on growth and improvement rather than on, the grade you got or the number focus, and looking at going up to, the student going up to their parent and saying, hey, I did better than I did last time, and I'm getting better at this, and I'm understanding it now, rather than, I didn't get the grade I wanted, but I'm doing better. It's that emphasis on improvement over time rather than just taking one specific moment in time and holding yourself to that.
Thank you. Any other comments as we're wrapping up on the Profile of a Graduate? Heather used the word hope in there. I'm curious what your hopes are for the Profile of a Graduate and how it's going to impact our students and prepare them for the future. Any closing thoughts?
So I hope that our students will seek a diversity of experience, and that we have an incredibly high drive in academics. I would love to see that drive matched in creative spaces, in connecting with the community, in getting to test themselves in areas of discomfort and getting to learn from that experience. And as Krish mentioned, to see that improvement every day. I would hope to see some choices made that feel a little uncomfortable and maybe into areas that our students don't know as much about. And I would hope to see our parents and our caregivers and our community members join in that expectation, that hope piece of it, and that they can help participate in helping our students make choices that are helping to create a more rounded individual, because we know that that's how they'll be much more successful in the long run.
I think my hope is that students can see themselves as successful, regardless of what letter might show up on that transcript. And speaking of transcript, I would hope that we could really move towards a more mastery-based transcript like we have at Gibson Eck. I think it's powerful to be able to describe yourself as what it is you know rather than a grade in a class.
Part of the profile of the graduate that gives me most hope is really the emphasis on the emerging skills that students use day to day, one of those being technology, and using those with integrity, most importantly. This wasn't always a big emphasis in our society, throughout the past. But I'm glad our district is taking a step forward and really ensuring that students of the future will graduate knowing not only how to navigate the physical world, but the digital world as well.
My hope is that a graduate of the school district or a family member of a graduate of the school district is able to say and point to numerous examples during their school time at multiple age levels where they are applying what they learned and making a direct connection to what they are doing at any moment in time in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and that there's a real value of what an Issaquah School Diploma means for them.
I just think when I think about the profile of a graduate for our district, I think about it through the lens of not only an educator, but also a parent within our system. And when I see our students learning in the most incredible ways throughout their journey through our school system, I just love when I see students engaged in joyful learning and when they're gaining confidence in themselves and their ability to contribute to their school community, but also the community beyond. So I think for me, my hope is that our students just are joyful in learning and they're developing all these really important skills, but through all of that, they're gaining confidence to be incredible contributors to our world.
Okay. This has been a really great discussion about the profile of a graduate. Before we go, though, we need to have a quiz. Okay, Huddle, it's time to put your critical thinking, effective communication, and other durable skills to the test on a quiz we're calling Future Ready Face-Off. In the spirit of our discussion, the rules are simple but require some flexible thinking. I will present the Huddle with several recent district news stories. The person who rings their bell and correctly or convincingly identifies the 3-year strategic plan priority area or one of the durable skills on display will graduate with this glorious and deceptively small gold star sticker. Are you ready to test your fortitude in the arena of life?
Yes.
All right, we're ready.
All right, let's begin.
Krish and I are going against the superintendent and two school board members. So
I do, but that's okay.
So we feel outnumbered.
Yeah.
Okay, number 1. The district announced that construction of the new high school is scheduled for spring 2026. In response to questions from the community and staff, they emphasized that a community engagement process will shape academic programs and campus design. Julia.
Collaboration and influence.
Oh, and Sydney?
I'm going to go with authentic engagement.
Okay, so we've got 1 durable skill and 1 strategic plan priority area. You're both correct. I will take that durable skill. That makes sense to me, so I'm giving each of you a point for that.
Ooh. Good job.
Number 2, the district's equity, diversity, and inclusion team invited families who have never attended a parent-teacher conference before, including families new to the U.S. public schools, to attend a virtual event for helpful tips and guidance for interacting with teachers. Translation support was also offered to ensure everyone interested had the ability to participate. Heather?
I would say authentic engagement as a priority area in the strategic plan.
Yes, authentic engagement is the answer to that. Number 3, the Issaquah School District announced that it will launch a full-time online high school in fall 2026 for grades 9 through 12, offering flexible, personalized learning along with athletics, arts, and traditional supports. Krish.
Academic opportunity strategic plan priority area.
That is correct. Nicely done.
Oh, I'm on the board.
You are on the board, yes. Get a point. Number 4. At Issaquah Valley Elementary School, the first cohort of dual language students, that is, kindergarten through grade 5, is now moving into middle school after outperforming national indicators for Spanish speaking, listening, writing, and reading. Marnie.
I'm definitely going to say academic opportunities.
It is academic opportunities. Number 5, students, staff, and families collaborated to help craft our district's Operational Expectation 17 sustainability policy. That's a mouthful. Giving students a voice in district-wide environmental practices. Heather.
I would go with the Profile of Graduate's current version of a skill that's important of collaboration and influence.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on that one, just because that's kind of broad? Marnie.
I was going to say organizational effectiveness. They were creating some of our organizational operational limitations.
Okay, very good. Actually, that is also correct. So here's how this is going to work. For the first time, we're going to have a tiebreaker between our superintendent and our current school board president. Okay, get those hands ready. Bonus question. In a May community update, the superintendent encouraged students, families, and staff to pause, reflect, and reach out with kind words, reminding everyone that strong connection and care help students thrive. Wow. Okay, that I could not have timed. Okay, we're going to see Marnie. You've got one chance of this. What is it?
I was going to say strategic plan priority, student well-being.
And Heather?
I was also going to say strategic plan. Priority area, student well-being.
Well, given that you are my boss's boss and you are even beyond that, my boss's boss's boss, I'm going to just leave it there. And so you both get a gold star today. So
thank you.
Thank you all for participating today. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Yep, thanks.
Thanks for joining our huddle today. All right, did you carefully count how many times we said profile in this entire episode? If so, send your final count along with your name and mailing address to webmaster@issaquah.wednet.edu. That's WED as in dog, N as in Nancy, ET. Please use the subject line Profile of a Graduate. The first 5 people with the correct guess will receive a commemorative certificate and gold star sticker by mail. If you enjoyed our discussion, please take a moment to subscribe or share the show with a friend. We're always looking for great topics for our huddle. To share your idea for a future show, visit isd411.org/podcast and scroll down to Suggest a Topic. For Homeroom Huddle, I'm Robert Miller. Thanks for listening.